Not every classic car becomes a legend. Some arrived at exactly the wrong moment, victims of bad timing, economic forces, or simply being the wrong product for a market that had moved on. Today, we're counting down 12 classic cars that dealers couldn't get rid of, machines that should have sold but didn't, models that gathered dust while buyers walked past, and cars that represent the painful moments when automotive dreams collided with brutal market reality. From AMC's struggle for credibility to Detroit's desperate attempts to keep muscle alive during the malaise era, these are the classics nobody wanted. This is the story of ambition meeting rejection. Number 12, 1980, Chevrolet Camaro Z28. The 1980 Chevrolet Camaro Z28 arrived during the darkest days of American performance, when fuel crises, emissions regulations, and economic malaise had crushed the muscle car market. The 350 cubic inch V8 produced 190 horsepower, numbers that seemed adequate until you realized this was supposed to be a performance car carrying legendary Z28 badging. The 350 delivered smooth power, but felt anemic compared to Z28s from just years earlier. The engine featured emissions equipment that strangled performance, creating acceleration that couldn't justify the Z28's premium price. Quarter-mile times hovered around 16 seconds, respectable for 1980, but disappointing for anything wearing performance credentials. The compression ratio had been lowered to around 8.2 to 1, dramatically reducing thermal efficiency and forcing the engine to work harder to produce even modest power output that disappointed enthusiasts. The catalytic converter and air pump system added substantial weight, increased complexity, and created exhaust restriction that prevented the engine from breathing efficiently at any RPM. The carburetor was calibrated primarily for emissions, compliance, and fuel economy, rather than performance, creating flat spots in the power delivery and hesitation during acceleration that made spirited driving frustrating. The exhaust system featured restrictive manifolds and small-diameter pipes that strangled exhaust flow, preventing efficient expulsion of combustion gases and limiting power throughout the entire operating range. The ignition timing was retarded significantly to reduce emissions, costing additional horsepower and creating power delivery that felt even more lethargic than the already disappointing numbers suggested. The 0 to 60 time typically exceeded 9 seconds, genuinely slow performance that made the Z28 feel underpowered in every driving situation, from highway merging to stoplight acceleration against economy cars. The trap speeds at the end of quarter-mile runs barely exceeded 80 miles per hour, numbers that would have been acceptable from a 6-cylinder family sedan, but were humiliating from a V8 wearing legendary Z28 badging and performance credentials. The fuel economy was terrible despite the low power output, typically returning 14 to 16 miles per gallon in mixed driving, meaning buyers suffered both poor performance and poor economy in a lose-lose combination. The engine's torque peak occurred at relatively low RPM, around 2,500 revolutions per minute, but the actual torque production was so modest that the low-end grunt muscle car enthusiasts expected and demanded simply didn't exist. The transmission gearing was tall to improve fuel economy and reduce emissions, but that meant the already weak engine was constantly laboring in gears too high for the available power, creating sluggish response. The clutch was light and easy to operate for daily driving comfort, but that provided little consolation when the engine couldn't deliver enough power to make spirited driving rewarding, exciting, or even possible. The throttle response was sluggish due to the large carburetor ventures and emissions equipment delays that created a frustrating disconnect between pedal input and actual acceleration, making the car feel even slower than the numbers indicated. The engine note was uninspiring and muffled, a strangled sound that lacked the aggressive exhaust tone muscle car buyers expected, and instead sounded like a tired family sedan struggling uphill under load. The cooling system was barely adequate for the engine's modest heat output, but even moderate ambient temperatures during summer could cause the Z28 to run hot in traffic, adding unreliability to the long list of disappointments. The maintenance requirements were typical for emission-strangled early 80s engines, requiring frequent tune-ups, carburetor adjustments, and emission system servicing that added ownership costs without improving the dismal performance or addressing the fundamental problems. The overall driving experience was one of constant disappointment. For anyone remembering Z28s from better times, with every acceleration attempt serving as a reminder that the muscle car era was truly dead and not coming back anytime soon. The The second-generation Camaro remained handsome despite being nearly a decade old. Chevrolet's designers tried creating excitement with graphics and spoilers, but styling couldn't overcome economic reality. Fuel prices remained elevated. Interest rates were climbing. The economy was weakening. Performance cars had become luxuries few could justify. Dealers watched Z28s sit unsold for months. The enthusiasts who'd purchased them eagerly during better times were gone. Young buyers couldn't afford them or secure financing. The inventory accumulated, representing floor plan costs mounting daily. The 1980 Z28 wasn't terrible. It was simply unwanted, arriving when nobody cared about performance anymore. Number 11. 1978. Ford Mustang II Cobra II. The 1978 Ford Mustang II. Cobra II represented Ford's misguided belief that graphics could compensate for pathetic performance. The 302 cubic inch V8 produced 139 horsepower, genuinely embarrassing output that made the Cobra II slower than many economy cars, despite its performance pretensions and aggressive styling. The 302 was strangled by emissions equipment and low compression. Acceleration felt sluggish regardless of how aggressively you drove. The 4-speed manual provided engagement but couldn't overcome fundamental weakness. The exhaust note was muffled rather than aggressive. Everything about the driving experience contradicted the Cobra graphics. The styling featured bold stripes, hood scoops, and appearance packages trying desperately to suggest performance. But test drives revealed truth immediately. This was marketing rather than muscle. The Mustang II platform was unloved, and adding graphics didn't change that basic reality or make buyers suddenly interested. Dealers couldn't move Cobra IIs because buyers weren't fooled. Enthusiasts wanting genuine performance chose Camaros or Firebirds. Economy buyers chose 4-cylinder Mustangs with better fuel economy. The Cobra II satisfied nobody, appealing to a market segment that simply didn't exist. The cars gathered dust until Ford discontinued the Mustang II entirely. Number 10. 1973. Chevrolet Chevelle SS 454. The 1973 Chevrolet Chevelle SS 454 should have continued Chevelle's legendary performance heritage. Instead, it became the last gasp of genuine Chevelle muscle, struggling as insurance costs and emissions regulations strangled sales. The 454 cubic inch LS4 V8 produced 275 horsepower under net ratings, genuine power that looked weak on paper. The LS4 featured compromises 1973 demanded: lower compression, restrictive exhaust, and emissions equipment reduced output while increasing complexity. The engine still produced over 400 pound-feet of torque, providing adequate acceleration. But numbers couldn't overcome insurance barriers, making SS Chevelle unaffordable for young buyers who'd been their core market. The Colonnade body introduced for 73 added weight and changed proportions. Fixed B-pillars met safety standards but made Chevelles look heavier. The SS package added graphics and performance details, but overall appearance suggested personal luxury rather than raw muscle. Chevrolet was repositioning the Chevelle away from traditional performance. The additional structural reinforcement required for the fixed B-pillars added approximately 200 pounds to the Chevelle's curb weight, transforming what had been a relatively nimble intermediate into something that felt ponderous and heavy during spirited driving. The roofline was raised slightly to meet federal rollover standards, increasing frontal area and creating more upright proportions that made the Chevelle look taller and less athletic than the sleek, low-slung predecessors that had defined the nameplate's glory years. The side windows no longer featured the frameless design that had created such clean-flowing lines on earlier Chevelle, instead incorporating thick B-pillars that interrupted the visual flow and created a more formal, sedan-like appearance. The front end featured larger, federally mandated bumpers that protruded further from the body, adding visual bulk and disrupting the clean integration that had characterized earlier Chevelle styling and made them so attractive. The rear bumper was similarly massive and protruding, creating a heavy, blocky appearance that emphasized the car's substantial mass, rather than suggesting speed or agility that muscle cars were supposed to embody. The greenhouse was larger with more glass area to improve visibility and meet safety requirements, but this made the body look smaller in proportion and reduced the aggressive, hunkered-down stance that had made earlier Chevelles look purposeful and mean. The beltline was raised, meaning the side glass was smaller vertically, creating a more massive, slab-sided appearance that suggested luxury sedan rather than performance coupe designed to dominate streets and strips. The opera windows in the C-pillar were available and heavily promoted, a styling feature borrowed from personal luxury coupes like the Monte Carlo that had absolutely no place on anything claiming to be a muscle car. The vinyl roof option was prominently featured in marketing materials and dealer showrooms, further emphasizing the shift toward personal luxury and away from the raw, purposeful simplicity that had defined muscle car aesthetics and appeal. The color palette shifted toward more conservative, mature hues, including earth tones, metallic browns, and muted golds that appealed to older, more affluent buyers, rather than the bold, aggressive colors like Hugger Orange and Rally Green that had announced performance intentions on earlier models. The interior featured more luxurious materials, including deeper cushioning, upgraded cloth or vinyl, and wood grain trim on the dashboard and door panels, creating an environment more appropriate for comfortable cruising than attacking back roads or drag strips. The gauge cluster was redesigned with smaller, less prominent instrumentation that prioritized ease of reading during normal driving over the performance-oriented, large tachometers and gauges that had characterized SS models from the muscle car era's peak. The seats were softer and more deeply cushioned for comfort during long highway drives, lacking the firm bolstering and supportive design that kept drivers planted during hard cornering and aggressive driving that muscle cars were supposed to encourage. The sound insulation was substantially increased with more padding in the doors, floor, and roof, creating a quiet, isolated cabin environment completely at odds with the visceral, mechanical experience muscle car enthusiasts wanted and expected. The marketing materials emphasized comfort, convenience, and style rather than performance, featuring images of well-dressed couples at country clubs or upscale restaurants, rather than the drag strips, street scenes, and aggressive driving imagery that had sold earlier Chevelle SS models to enthusiastic young buyers. Insurance companies killed SS sales with premiums exceeding car payments. Young buyers couldn't afford coverage. Older buyers chose luxury over performance they no longer wanted. The SS package disappeared after '73, the 454 vanishing from option lists. Dealers watched Chevelle sit unsold while the market abandoned traditional muscle entirely. Number 9, 1979, Chevrolet Monza, Spyder 58. The 1979 Chevrolet Monza Spyder 58 represented Chevrolet's desperate attempt to position a subcompact as a muscle car. The 305 cubic inch V8 produced 145 horsepower, pathetic output creating only disappointment for anyone expecting genuine performance from over 300 cubic inches of displacement. The 305 was strangled by emissions equipment, low compression, and restrictive exhaust. Acceleration felt slow even by late 70s standards. The Monza weighed 2,800 pounds, yet the anemic engine meant sluggish performance and poor fuel economy. The 4-speed manual provided engagement, but couldn't overcome fundamental powerlessness. The styling was generic GM subcompact with nothing distinctive justifying Spyder badging. Chevrolet added graphics trying to create visual excitement, but underneath lived a compromised economy car platform. The handling was soft and uninspiring despite sporting pretensions that the marketing materials tried desperately to create. Dealers couldn't sell Monza Spyders because buyers recognized the truth immediately. Muscle car enthusiasts walked away after test drives. Economy buyers chose 4-cylinder versions with better efficiency. The Spyder occupied automotive no man's land, satisfying nobody while accumulating on dealer lots, until desperate discounts finally moved the unwanted inventory. Number 8, 1979, Dodge Magnum XE. The 1979 Dodge Magnum XE represented Dodge's final attempt at personal luxury performance when the market for such vehicles had completely collapsed. V8 engines ranging from 360 to 400 cubic inches produced up to 195 horsepower, modest output reflecting the era's restrictions and priorities that emphasized efficiency over everything else. The available engines were designed for fuel economy rather than performance. Even the largest 400 cubic inch option produced just 195 horsepower, genuinely weak output from substantial displacement. The 3-speed automatic was standard, with 4-speed manual available for traditionalists, Performance felt heavy and slow, regardless of powertrain combination. The styling emphasized personal luxury, with formal roofline and presence over athleticism. Dodge offered graphics packages trying to create excitement, but underneath lived a soft, heavy coupe. The interior featured comfort amenities, suggesting luxury rather than performance, creating confused character that satisfied neither luxury nor performance buyers. The formal roofline featured a near-vertical rear window and sharp angle at the rear deck that created Lincoln Continental-style proportions completely inappropriate for anything claiming to be a performance vehicle. The hood was long and relatively flat, without the aggressive power bulges or functional scoops that muscle cars required, creating an appearance more suitable for a premium sedan than a performance coupe trying to attract enthusiasts. The front end featured a massive chrome grille, with vertical bars that emphasized width and presence but lacked the aggressive, predatory character that performance cars needed to look credible and purposeful. The headlights were large and rectangular, set in chrome bezels that created a formal, upscale appearance, completely at odds with the sleek, hidden headlights or aggressive lighting treatments that characterized genuine performance vehicles. The side profile was slab-sided and formal, with minimal character lines or sculptural elements, creating a visual mass that suggested weight and bulk rather than the speed and agility performance buyers expected and demanded. The rear end featured full-width taillights and substantial chrome bumper that emphasized the car's considerable girth, while the high-deck lid and formal proportions made the Magnum look like a shrunken luxury sedan. The wheel openings were large, but the standard wheels were conservative-styled steel units with trim rings rather than the aggressive mag-style wheels or blacked-out steelies that performance cars required to look credible to enthusiasts. The window frames featured bright chrome trim that caught light and created visual breaks in the body side, emphasizing luxury rather than the blacked-out or body-colored treatments that made performance cars look sleeker and more aggressive. The door handles were large, chromed units that protruded obviously rather than the flush or integrated designs that reduced visual clutter and suggested aerodynamic purpose that performance vehicles should prioritize. The interior featured plush velour seating with deep cushioning and soft bolstering designed for comfort rather than the firm, supportive bucket seats with aggressive bolstering that held drivers in place during spirited driving. The dashboard was covered in padded vinyl with simulated wood grain appliques that created an upscale appearance completely inappropriate for performance applications, where function should triumph over decoration and false luxury. The steering wheel was large diameter, with thick padding for comfort, rather than the smaller, thinner-rimmed wheels that provided better control feel and were universally preferred by performance-oriented drivers who valued feedback. The gauge cluster featured small, easy-to-read instruments optimized for relaxed cruising rather than the large, prominent tachometers and performance gauges that allowed monitoring engine speed and vital functions during aggressive driving. The center console was wide and featured deep storage compartments, cup holders, and convenience features that emphasized comfort and practicality rather than the purposeful, driver-focused layouts that characterized genuine performance cars. The overall effect was a vehicle that couldn't decide whether it wanted to be a personal luxury coupe or a performance machine, failing to satisfy either market segment and creating something that appealed to nobody, despite Dodge's desperate marketing efforts. Dealers struggled with Magnums because the market segment had disappeared. Young buyers wanted efficient imports. Older buyers chose luxury sedans or practical vehicles, making sense economically. The Magnum was too thirsty for economy buyers, too slow for enthusiasts. Dodge canceled it after '79, abandoning the segment and admitting traditional American performance was finished. Number 7, 1977 Pontiac Can-Am. The 1977 Pontiac Can-Am represented Pontiac's confused attempt at creating a GTO successor for an era when muscle cars were commercially toxic. The 400 cubic inch V8 produced 200 horsepower, modest output that couldn't justify the Can-Am's aggressive styling or premium pricing in a market that had abandoned performance entirely. The 400 featured emissions equipment and tuning, emphasizing mid-range torque over peak power, performance felt lethargic compared to muscle cars from better times. Pontiac offered only 3-speed automatic, no manual option, emphasizing that the Can-Am prioritized comfort over genuine performance, despite aggressive appearance suggesting otherwise. The styling was simultaneously the Can-Am's most distinctive feature and greatest liability. The massive hood scoop, bold graphics, and white and orange color scheme were striking but polarizing. Many buyers found the appearance embarrassingly garish. Underneath the graphics lived a compromised intermediate that couldn't deliver muscle car excitement. Dealers couldn't sell Can-Ams because buyers understood they were paying for graphics rather than performance. Pontiac built only 1,277 before discontinuing the model after one disappointing year. The car sat while buyers chose Firebirds or Trans Ams, offering more convincing performance credentials. The Can-Am represented confusion about what performance meant in the late 70s. Number 6. 1975 Oldsmobile 442. The 1975 Oldsmobile 442 marked the final year. The nameplate resembled anything like a muscle car. The 455 cubic inch V8 produced 250 horsepower under net ratings. Modest output disguising substantial torque, but unable to overcome market resistance to traditional muscle that had become commercially unviable. The 455 featured compromises mid-70s regulations demanded. Lower compression, restrictive exhaust, and emissions equipment strangled breathing. The engine produced over 400 pound-feet of torque, providing adequate acceleration for those understanding how to use it. But performance felt disappointing compared to 442s from when Oldsmobile actually prioritized speed. The styling emphasized luxury over aggression. Oldsmobile moved the 442 upmarket, adding comfort features and positioning it as gentleman's performance rather than raw muscle. Graphics were subtle, interiors were plush, and overall character suggested refinement. Oldsmobile tried saving the 442 by redefining it, but that redefinition killed its soul completely. Dealers watched 442s sit unsold. The nameplate wasn't luxurious enough to compete with Cutlass Supreme models dominating sales, wasn't powerful enough for enthusiasts, remembering when 442 meant genuine performance. The 442 disappeared after 75, Oldsmobile abandoning performance entirely and admitting muscle cars no longer fit their strategy. Number 5. 1974 Plymouth Roadrunner 440. The 1974 Plymouth Roadrunner 440 represented the last year Plymouth offered the legendary 440 engine. Dealers struggled moving them as the muscle car market died and buyers abandoned traditional performance. The 440 cubic inch V8 produced 275 horsepower under net ratings, adequate output that couldn't overcome buyer resistance to muscle cars. The 440 featured emissions equipment and compromises 74 required. Compression was lowered, exhaust was restrictive, power delivery was smooth but uninspiring. Plymouth matched it with heavy-duty transmissions, though most buyers chose automatics as muscle cars became civilized. Performance was adequate but not exciting enough to justify insurance premiums, making Roadrunners unaffordable. The styling featured Plymouth's intermediate body, looking more mature than previous generations. Plymouth moved the Roadrunner upmarket, adding luxury contradicting the stripped-down heritage that had made it successful. Cartoon graphics became subdued, interiors gained options that would have been unthinkable earlier. The character shifted from raw muscle to civilized performance. Dealers watched Roadrunners sit unsold because buyers didn't want what Plymouth offered. Enthusiasts wanted affordable, stripped-down performance Plymouth no longer provided. By adding luxury and raising prices, Plymouth turned the Roadrunner into another mid-size coupe without distinctive character. The nameplate continued, but genuine muscle died in 74. Number 4. 1972 Buick GS Stage 1. The 1972 Buick GS Stage 1 should have been legendary. Instead, it became an orphan dealers couldn't sell as Buick's performance image faded. The 455 cubic inch V8 with Stage 1 equipment produced 360 horsepower under gross ratings, The last year, Buick would offer such power before regulations killed high-performance engines completely. The 455 Stage 1 featured aggressive camshaft, improved breathing, and tuning, delivering massive torque exceeding 500 pound-feet. The engine powered the GS brutally when throttle was buried. Buick matched it with automatic or 4-speed manual and heavy-duty components handling the torque. The combination created genuine capability, but finding buyers wanting Buick performance was impossible. The camshaft featured increased duration and lift compared to standard Buick engines, creating a distinctive, lumpy idle that announced the Stage 1's performance intentions to anyone who heard it running. The cylinder heads were specially selected and port-matched to maximize airflow, with careful attention to intake and exhaust port shapes that allowed the big block to breathe deeply at high RPM when lesser engines were gasping. The intake manifold was a low-restriction design that minimized flow losses between the carburetor and combustion chambers, ensuring maximum air and fuel reached the cylinders for complete combustion. The exhaust system featured larger diameter pipes and high-flow mufflers that reduced back pressure dramatically, allowing spent combustion gases to exit efficiently and making room for the next intake charge. The Stage 1 designation included functional hood scoops that fed cool outside air directly to the air cleaner, reducing intake temperatures and increasing air density for measurably more power. The 4-speed manual transmission featured close-ratio gearing with a Hurst shifter that provided positive mechanical shifts, allowing drivers to keep the engine in its power band during acceleration. The automatic transmission was the proven turbo-hydromatic unit, with firmer shift calibration and heavy-duty internal components capable of withstanding repeated full-throttle launches without failure. The rear axle featured a limited slip differential with aggressive lockup characteristics that put power to both rear wheels, dramatically improving traction and preventing the single-wheel burnouts that wasted power. The suspension included heavy-duty springs, larger anti-roll bars, and performance-oriented shock absorbers that controlled body motion during hard acceleration and allowed the GS to put its massive torque to the ground effectively. The styling was restrained with subtle badging, functional scoops, and conservative graphics. The interior was pure Buick, comfortable seats, quality materials, upscale trim making the GS feel expensive. This was gentleman's muscle, appealing to mature buyers who'd outgrown flash. But by '72, even those buyers were disappearing as insurance costs and priorities made muscle irrelevant. Buick management was uncomfortable with muscle cars not fitting their luxury identity. Insurance companies were crushing sales. Buick's customers weren't buying high-performance intermediates. Dealers watched GS Stage 1s sit unsold, despite discounts and incentives. Buick canceled genuine performance after '72, refocusing on luxury. The Stage 1 represented Buick's brief performance experiment and the market's brutal rejection. Number 3, 1971, Dodge Charger Super Bee. The 1971 Dodge Charger Super Bee arrived as the muscle car market collapsed completely. Dodge merged the Super Bee name with the Charger body, offering engines from 383 to 440 cubic inches, producing up to 375 horsepower. But insurance costs, emissions regulations, and market rejection meant Super Bees sat unsold, while the muscle car era died around them. Available engines ranged from moderate 383 to legendary 440, with 375 horses. Even powerful options featured compromises from emissions equipment, lower compression, and restrictive exhaust. Performance was adequate by '71 standards, but disappointing compared to when Dodge prioritized speed. 4-speed manual remained available, though most chose automatics. The styling featured Dodge's handsome Charger body, with distinctive graphics and performance badging. But markets didn't care about styling when insurance companies had declared war. Young buyers faced unaffordable premiums. Older buyers chose luxury over performance they no longer wanted. Emissions regulations and safety standards were tightening, and manufacturers knew building Super Bees was becoming unsustainable economically and technically. Dealers watched helplessly as Super Bees gathered dust, while sales collapsed industry-wide. Buyers either couldn't afford insurance or chose practical vehicles making economic sense. Dodge discontinued the Super Bee after '71, consolidating performance before eventually abandoning traditional muscle entirely. The Super Bee represented everything wrong at that terrible moment: unaffordable insurance, reduced power, and a market that had moved on completely. Number 2, 1971, Pontiac GTO Judge. The 1971 Pontiac GTO Judge takes second position because it represented the painful end of Pontiac's most outrageous muscle car package. The 455 cubic inch HO-V8 produced 335 horsepower under new net ratings. Still genuine muscle car power, but unable to overcome market forces. Insurance hikes and emissions rules killed demand so completely that dealers couldn't move Judges. Pontiac dropped the package after 71, admitting defeat. The 455 HO featured aggressive tuning, delivering strong performance despite restrictions. The engine produced massive torque, making the Judge genuinely quick with brutal acceleration, overwhelming rear tires. Pontiac matched it with 4-speed manual or automatic and heavy-duty components. Performance remained impressive, mid-6-second 0 to 60 times, and low 14-second quarter miles proved the Judge could run. But performance couldn't overcome hostile market conditions. The styling in 71 was slightly more restrained, but still unmistakable. Distinctive graphics, bold striping, and trademark rear spoiler remained, though Pontiac toned down wildest colors. The Judge featured distinctive badging, making it instantly recognizable, but recognition had become liability rather than asset, as insurance companies specifically targeted high-profile muscle cars. Insurance companies made the Judge toxic, with premiums often exceeding payments. Young buyers faced costs they literally couldn't afford. The outrageous styling attracted exactly the scrutiny Pontiac wanted to avoid. Sales collapsed as buyers either couldn't afford insurance or chose subtle performance, not attracting punitive attention. Pontiac discontinued the Judge after 71, recognizing flamboyant muscle cars had ended permanently. Dealers watched Judges sit unsold for months, despite desperate price cuts. The 71 Judge represented an era ending as quickly as it began. Number 1, 1970, AMC Rebel Machine. The 1970 AMC Rebel Machine takes the top position as the classic car dealers most desperately couldn't sell. A genuinely capable machine from a manufacturer nobody trusted with performance credentials. AMC fitted a 390 cubic inch V8, producing 340 horsepower into the Rebel's body, creating something genuinely quick competing with Detroit's Big Three. But AMC's weak brand image meant dealers struggled selling machines. Despite legitimate performance capabilities, proving everything right mechanically, but everything wrong from marketing and brand perspectives. The 390 featured Ram air induction, aggressive tuning, and components designed for serious performance, matching or exceeding competitors. The engine produced strong power throughout its range, delivering brutal acceleration, competing with GTOS and Chevelle. AMC fitted the machine with 4-speed manual, heavy-duty suspension, and aggressive gearing, making it genuinely quick. Quarter-mile times in the low 14-second range proved the machine could run with the best. But performance credentials couldn't overcome AMC's economy car reputation, making buyers skeptical. The styling was deliberately outrageous, becoming its greatest liability. AMC initially offered only red, white, and blue paint with enormous graphics, making the car impossible to miss and impossible to take seriously. The patriotic color scheme was polarizing. Some loved the bold statement, while most found it embarrassingly garish. AMC later allowed subdued colors, recognizing not everyone wanted driving a rolling American flag. The functional Ram air hood, bold graphics, and performance details announced intentions, but buyers didn't believe AMC could build genuine muscle when known exclusively for economy cars. Dealers couldn't sell machines because AMC's brand image worked decisively against them, despite genuine capabilities. Muscle car buyers trusted Chevrolet, Pontiac, Dodge, and Plymouth, brands with performance heritage and racing credentials. They didn't trust AMC, a company known for ramblers and economy cars, rather than muscle and performance. The machine could outrun competitors in straight lines, but buyers didn't care about capabilities when they fundamentally didn't trust the brand wanting performance from manufacturers with proven records, not economy car manufacturers, trying desperately to crash the party. AMC's limited dealer network meant the machine never achieved visibility or penetration, overcoming skepticism. Sales were disappointingly low. AMC built fewer than 2,000 machines for 70 before discontinuing the model and retreating to economy cars where they belonged. The machine sat on AMC dealer lots for months, gathering dust, while GTOS and Chevelle sold quickly at Pontiac and Chevrolet stores. Despite offering similar or inferior performance, dealers tried everything: discounting, demonstrating genuine performance capabilities, emphasizing value propositions of getting muscle car performance for less money. Nothing worked because buyers wanted brands they trusted, nameplates with heritage, and manufacturers they believed could deliver performance. AMC wasn't on that list, despite building something genuinely quick and genuinely capable. The Rebel Machine was genuinely quick, genuinely well-engineered, and genuinely unwanted. It sat on dealer lots as the ultimate example. Dealers couldn't eliminate despite offering legitimate performance-matching competitors. Today, surviving machines are collectible precisely because they were commercial failures, rare, capable, and representing AMC's brief moment trying building something genuinely exciting before market rejection forced them back to economy cars. But in 1970, they were orphans. Dealers couldn't sell at any price, proving in the muscle car market, brand reputation mattered as much as quarter-mile times. These 12 classic cars prove that capability didn't guarantee commercial success when timing, brand image, regulations, and market conditions turned hostile. From AMC's brand struggles to Detroit's battles with emissions and insurance costs, these cars sat unsold while markets moved on. They represent painful moments when automotive ambition collided with economic reality, when performance became commercially toxic, and when dealers watched classics gather dust. Which of these forgotten failures would you rescue? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you love stories about classics that history tried forgetting, hit that subscribe button.